Hello and welcome to Filmi Ladies. We are Pitu and Beth, and today we have a very, very special guest. We have Manish Mathur, whose wonderful podcast, Bollywood Drafts, we have both been on and had so much fun. And I know some of our listeners have heard that episode. We always look forward to chatting with Manish because he is so funny and so insightful and shares my love for K3G. And Manish has two podcasts. He has Bollywood Drafts and he also has It's Pod to Be You, which you can find on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And we know that Valentine's Day is coming up very, very soon. So happy Valentine's Day, Beth and Manish and everybody who's listening to us. And because Beth and I are messy, messy bitches, we decided that the best way to celebrate Valentine's Day is to go all out on the messiness. And what could be messier and filmier and more dramatic and more just messy than a love triangle. So today we're going to talk about love triangles. We each picked a movie. I picked Sanjay Leela Bhansali's Dil De Chuke Sanam from 1999, which takes all the messiness to like a really heightened level of melodrama. Manish picked Manmarziyaan from 2018, and Beth got in a time machine. So she got into like her TARDIS and she went back to 1965, and she's going to talk about Shakespearewallah. So welcome, Manish. And tell us, our listeners who may or may not have seen Manmarziyaan, can you tell them like a quick synopsis? And then can you also tell us why you chose this one?
Yes. Well, thanks so much for having me. I'm really, really happy and excited to be here. I was just watching your Jewish travel episode just today, just to like get back into the groove. And I was just it's so much fun to watch you both and to be on the podcast or on the channel is really exciting. So thank you so much. Manmarziyaan is a love triangle that is very messy and somewhat toxic. It's about Rumi, who is a ex-hockey player who is in love with Vicky, a DJ, which should be your first red flag. He's a DJ. And they are in love, kind of, but mainly they seem to just want to fool around and yell and scream at each other. But he won't marry her or doesn't really see on bird that he should marry her. And her family is pressuring her to get married. And she keeps telling her family that, well, I'm with someone, he'll marry me. He's promising he'll marry me. He wants to marry me. But the poor guy seems to always forget that he is doing this. He should be doing that. So then she finally agrees to marry someone else, Robbie, and as soon as she makes that decision, guess who comes back? Vicky. And it's the three of them are just caught in this love triangle that is a lot of fun to watch, but probably a headache to live through. And yeah, it's a really messy, funny movie directed by Anurag Kashyap, starring Tapsi Pannu and Vicky Kaushal and Abhishek Bachchan. I chose it. Well, I don't know. There's so many great love triangles. I'm a big romance fan. But I feel like I've talked a lot about, the Yash Chopras and the Aditya Chopras and the Karan Johars on all my podcasts. So I wanted to choose something a little bit more different than what I usually talk about on podcasts and I love Kashyap as a filmmaker. I love these actors and I think this movie is so unique. It has such a unique style to it. It is a very it's not a very long movie. It's about 2.5 hours, but it feels like there's so much going on and the characters are always moving, and I think the relationship at the center is really complicated and fun to digest. And each time that I've seen it, I feel like I've come away with something new about it and have a new take on it. So it's yeah, it was really fun to revisit it for the podcast, and I'm really excited to talk to the both of you about it.
Yay!
Kashyap has not made a ton of appearances on this podcast, so that's exciting too, because I know he's a director. Obviously, a lot of people have a lot of thoughts about, and I think
Yeah,
we've really only talked about Bombay Velvet,
Yeah.
because we are
Dave
not
D, I think,
a little
yeah,
bit,
Dave D.
yeah,
a
Yeah,
little
yeah.
bit. Yeah.
Speaking of love triangles.
Right. Yeah, Manmarziyaan is pretty cool. I actually really love Tapsi Pannu's character in it, and Vicky Kaushal is so entertaining but also infuriating at the same time. And the one dialogue I always remember from this movie, because it's so unusual to hear that kind of language in a film, unless it's like a gangster movie, right? Although it's Anurag Kashyap, so it shouldn't be too shocking. There's a line where Tapsi Pannu says to Vicky Kaushal, and I'm paraphrasing, but it's something like "तू बंदा ठीक है, लेकिन जिम्मेदारी के नाम पे हक देता है." Like when it's time for you to take responsibility, you just like shit all over it. And
Yeah, yeah.
it's so crass. And it's so surprising to hear the leading lady say that, even though she's not portrayed like, say, a Bhansali leading lady would, right? But it still kind of like takes you out of it for a second. You're like, oh, okay, wow. But Vicky Kaushal's entire styling in this movie is also so cool. Like his hair, the whole DJ thing. Oh my God. I mean, like you said, red flag. That guy's a red flag. Beth, have you seen Manmarziyaan too?
I have, yeah. And I just love Topsy Panu. I do. I I don't know. Every time I see her, I'm just so happy. I think she's so
Yeah.
good.
She's
And
got
she and
a
Vicky are really good on screen together as
Yeah.
well, actually. They both have that like equal amount of sort of like fire. So
yeah.
there's
Mm.
scenes where they're being romantic, but also when they're being hella toxic with each other are very like believable. They're very like heightened emotion and just kind of like Manish said, don't want to be in it.
Mm.
Yeah, she's got a great look in this movie because her hair is just like a lion's mane and she's like always just like running or speed walking or like hitting someone. And it's but then she does all this in like a very traditional Punjabi outfit, so or she's like always like exercising or doing something and it's just like it's I think that this movie is I think what I find so interesting about this is that like yeah, Kashyap is known for his like gangster crime movies. I feel like in some ways he films this movie like a gangster movie with these like very like funny kind of fiery dialogue and like this very like frantic, energetic
Mm.
camera work and this movie really never like sits still in some ways or um and so there's always this like element of just like heat and energy and fire, something you don't really see in a lot of romance movies. And
Mm.
I find that there's still so much like homages or respect towards like the more old school conventional romances. Like I think this movie has gotten compared to like Dil De Chuke Sanam a lot,
Mm.
Chandni a lot. Sort of taking that like very tropey um, thing and then making it into this like kind of crazy wild movie that only he could make but still showing that like he's seen all those classics and he likes them but he's also doing them in his own way.
Mm. Yeah, there's no chiffon sari in the snow in this movie.
Can you
Yeah.
imagine?
I can't actually. I can
That'd be
imagine
wild.
Tapsi in like a gym outfit in the snow. That I can
Sure.
imagine
Yeah.
more than a chiffon sari. And then Beth, tell us about Shakespearewallah.
Shakespearewallah is Merchant and Ivory. It is the basic. So it's not. This film is not really about the love triangle particularly, but that's the kind of device they use for showing this. The Raj is over. English people are, and English culture is fading into oblivion quickly in this movie. And at the center, as the way to get at some of that, is this love triangle between young Felicity Kendall, who plays the daughter of an acting troupe that goes, an English-based acting troupe that does have also Indian members that go around schools, palaces, whatever, doing Shakespeare, which of course is based on her real life. That is how she grew up. Her real parents play her parents in the movie. Then she falls for young Shashi Kapoor here, who is just a playboy, basically. He just kind of doesn't do anything and and he is really smitten by what the movie suggests is her authenticity, because the third part of our triangle is a film actress played by Madhur Jaffrey, who is
Mm.
very filmy. And so you see this contrast between like kind of rough and tumble, basically impoverished Shakespearean troupe in this English girl, contrasted with this extremely put together, very mannered, some might say very artificial, very scheming um, Indian film star. Uh, and he kind of bops back and forth between them for a while. And at the end, I mean, I won't spoil it for people who haven't seen it, but there's a lot. I don't think this is really a culture clash movie so much as it is a people clash movie, but once Shashi Kapoor says the word is it, things are not going well. This is the number one example of Shashi saying is it in my, collection of such films. And I I do love I think the people in this movie are just really interesting. And of course the setting is fascinating. The idea of being a traveling Shakespeare troupe in India in the 1960s, like what a wild, what a wild yet remarkably true to life thing. And so the idea of staginess and when are we acting and what are we projecting kind of runs through all of this too. It's fascinating.
Interesting. It's so interesting to hear you say that he plays a playboy, but then you also said that he says Izzat.
Yeah.
So those two things aren't really sitting together for me.
Well, as is true in some other Shashi Kapoor films, the woman he is fond of getting attention from other men, that's not going to happen. He loses it and he, starts punching people basically. And yeah, it's very much, and he taught, is at the very end of the film, he tells Lizzie about, 100 years ago in my family, my great uncle or whatever, I think it was a bangle seller or a sari seller or something, accidentally walks into the women's quarters and my uncle like cuts his head off or whatever. And it's still talked about today. And is it as strong? You're like, oh dear God, talk about red flags, right? But it's a very bittersweet kind of film. And I don't know why this was the first one that leapt to mind for me for love triangles, when we've talked about many a film on this podcast that is a love triangle, including Rangila, which was last week's episode. So,
Right.
they are everywhere, obviously, but this one feels a little different to me, even though the structure is, of course, similar to others.
Right. Well, the setting itself is so different, and there's so many other things going on too, right? Like there's the history part of it, there's the cultural clash part of it. So it has all these like different additional layers on top of the existing messiness.
Yeah.
So I chose Hum Dil De Chuke Sanam, which is actually a movie I do not enjoy because I don't particularly care for Bhansali. I don't care for Salman Khan. I don't care for Ajay Devgan. So one might ask, Pitu,
great choice.
Did you watch this movie? I watched this movie because I'm a diehard Aishwarya Rai fan. And I have not seen this movie since I watched it in the movie theater in 1999. Wow. So I thought it was time to revisit it. And wow, that was quite a revisit. So some things stayed true. I still think Bhansali is very melodramatic, but I could appreciate this film a little bit more this time. Aishwarya I thought was phenomenal throughout, and Salman was not great. And then Ajay Devgan was actually decent. So some interesting things that came up. So story-wise, it's pretty simple. Aishwarya is the spoiled daughter of this rich musician person, and they live in this gigantic, and I do mean gigantic, joint family in this absolutely enormous Haveli that looks like 10 Havelis put together in the border of like Rajasthan and Gujarat or something. And nobody in this Haveli seems to have a job because people are just dancing and singing all the time, which
their job is Haveli.
Their job is Haveli. So I don't have a philosophical problem with that. I just don't understand why they are so idle all the time. But anyway, so Samir, who is Salman Khan, who is half Italian and he's half Indian, his mom is Italian, he decides to come to India to study from music from Aishwarya Rai's dad. And then, of course, they like lock eyes across a chandelier because it's a Bhansali film. And of course, she's Aishwarya, who can resist her, and they fall in love. And then of course, her dad is like, you can't marry him. You have to marry this very boring staid person who is the only adult in the room, who is Ajay Devgan, and you have no choice. And she's like, okay, fine. And both Salman and Aishwarya are like, okay, fine, we'll just deal with the cards we're dealt, I guess. And then she marries Ajay Devgan, and then he discovers that she has married him against her will and that she actually loves someone else. And then he agrees to take her to Italy to find Samir, because, you know, that's what you do. You just go to a foreign country and you roam the streets looking for your wife's ex-lover. And then I think it's fair to give a spoiler for a 1999 movie that everybody has seen. In the end, she, you know, reunites with Salman, and you're like, will she, won't she, will she, won't she? But then she decides in favor of Ajay Devgan and she goes back to him. So it's 3 hours of very high pitch of all emotions. Um, all the colors in the rainbow in every single set. My eyes were very tired after 3 hours. Like I needed to put like an eye gel or something because there's a lot happening. There's a lot of songs. Everyone breaks into songs at the drop of a hat, but the songs are very beautifully choreographed. So I don't have a complaint about it. Mostly I just wanted to watch Dil De Chuke Sanam because I love the original that it's based off of. It's based off of Wo Saat Din, which is such a nice, quiet indie movie where Padmini Kolhapure plays the role that Aishwarya has. Nasruddin Shah plays the role of Ajay Devgan, and he is just amazing. And Anil Kapoor is hysterical as Prem Pratap Patiale Wale, which is the role that Salman does. And I still think Wo Saat Din is leagues ahead of Hum Dil De Chuke Sanam. But I'm glad I watched Hum Dil De Chuke Sanam because it's interesting. But I have a feeling the people in your movies are way more mature than the people in my movie were.
I doubt it.
Well, yeah, maybe not Vicky Kaushal. So let's talk about that for a second. Would a love triangle work according to you guys if the people in it were sensible and logical, basically like us? Or do they have to be some level of emotional stuntedness? What do you guys think?
I think that I mean, I don't know. I guess I view myself as a romantic and someone that thinks that, when it comes to, romance and these kinds of stories, you kind of do need that emotional stuntedness. You need some because there's just something so like uh, like just internal about it. When I'm watching Manmarziyaan, I'm thinking, well, yeah, of course, like any woman who's on Reddit or who's online should see all the red flags that, Vicky Kaushal is bringing, or see even the ways, or any guy should be wary of kind of inserting himself into this like toxic,
Mm.
storm that's going on. But it's like you see someone and you fall in love with them and you just can't, the heart wants what it wants, right? You just have that's just part of it. And even the most logical people that can get, big degrees and can have great jobs or who can, take care of their house or take care of all their stuff, there's something so romantic to me about, all that just kind of goes away when when this person you're in love with is in front of you. And like, of course, it's a movie, so we have that, there's always that element to it, things being more heightened. But I think there's something more. I don't know. I mean, I have seen movies with very logical, sensible people, and I think they are very charming and very watchable. But I think when it comes to a love triangle, or when it comes to especially these kinds of movies, there has to be a little bit of that immaturity there.
So messy, Manish, so messy. Beth, what do you think?
I think that unlike in geometry and like architecture and stuff where a triangle is considered incredibly stable and like you only need three legs to make a stool that can sit even right on the ground. But emotionally, culturally, in many places, not all, but three is not an acceptable number for a romantic relationship much of the time. So it is by nature and it helps to have emotional like if everybody approached everyone who found themselves in a triangle, because I don't think many people set out to make a triangle in movies anyway. Um, it- if everyone was just like really mature and with it, and it wouldn't happen for
Right.
movies. So it
Right.
has to be. I'm with Manish on this one. I think it kind of has to be someone is not like fully realized or fully honest or fully realistic for the world of the film or whatever in order for there to be one in the first place. And like as I was doing a quick Google earlier for what are some of the top Bollywood love triangle movies, you're like, well, all of them. But like we mentioned Dev D in passing, but like we've talked about Dev Das at length on this podcast in as much as we find him super annoying. So like if Dev Das were a better person, this wouldn't happen.
Right.
Right. So like I think it's gotta be. And at the very least, it's someone who's trying to maybe escape something or not face a certain reality. Like you don't want to accept that the other two people are in the better, more stable, whatever or relationship. So you kind of
Yeah.
toddler on and not face reality. So I think it's
There's
inherent almost.
also the thing, like, you literally cannot have a love triangle and have at least one person, maybe two, maybe all three, is going to be the loser. There's going to be someone who's going to get their heart completely smashed and stomped on, because otherwise it's just not going to work. At least in Bollywood, you're not going to have a movie where all three people walk off into the sunset together. If there's anyone who could make that happen, it would be Anurag Kashyap. But
That's true.
I I think that's also where it plays with the audience's sympathies, right? Like, you know that, like, in Hum Dil De Chuke Sanam, for example, or Wasat, or any of these movies we're discussing, at the end, there's going to be one person that walks off into the sunset empty-handed. And so one person's win is always going to result in the other person's loss. It's always going to be a zero-sum game. And I think that's also where that emotion comes in, right? Like, do you do the right thing, as Ajay Devgan's character does in Hum Dil De Chuke Sanam, or as Abhishek Bachchan's character does in Manmarziyaan, or do you actually not do the right thing? But even then, someone's gonna suffer, which I think is also what makes us so entertained by these, because we're all of us enjoying that to some extent.
Yeah, I had a really interesting I thought when I was watching Manmarziyaan for the podcast. And I was kind of thinking, like, I was going into it thinking, yes, Abhishek Bachchan, he's older by like what, 5, 10 years perhaps. He's the banker, he's the more mature one, but in some ways, in the second half of the movie, he kind of, I think, subconsciously keeps pushing Rumi towards Vicky. She tells him that, oh, like, I'm with you, I want to stay in this marriage, I like you, fall in love with you, like, that's the past. And he keeps telling her, are you sure? Are you sure? Are you sure? And
Mm.
then he actually has them meet up, knowing that she has this sort of obsession or thing with him. And, she makes her choices and she's an adult, of course. But I'm like, if you would leave her, then she would eventually move. It would be easier for her to move on if you just believed her. And I think in some way, I think the same thing of Ajay Devgan and Hamza De Chukesanam too, where if he doesn't take her to Italy or Hungary, as it is,
Yeah.
um, then yeah, she might be heartbroken for the first 6 months, a year of their marriage, but the whole lifetime, eventually she'll learn to live with it, which she does,
Mhm.
and that like I think this is an idea of like you gotta like trust your partner and what they're saying, even if they're trying to convince themselves or they're trying to convince you, but there's this element of but I think it's just like this like very male thing, perhaps, and like speaking as a guy, I can relate to it as it's like I just need to know. Like I need to
Mm.
know. Like I can't maybe it's not a guy thing, but I don't have any other experience of my own. But it seems like I just like I understand where they're coming from too, of like, I want to make sure that like the person that with me is like with me and not, pining over someone else. While I'm trying to like I also like well, I'm trying to like build this, but also like while am I even like wasting my effort
Mm.
in trying to build a relationship if they're with thinking about someone else, So I get it from both perspectives, but I'm watching it today being like, my guy, just let her be. She's fine. She'll get over it.
That's interesting, because, like, one of the movies that we have spoken about on the podcast before is actually Silsila. And I feel so bad for Sanjeev Kumar's character in that movie, because he has no idea what's going on. Well, I mean, he has a little bit of an inkling of what's going on, especially in the Rang Barse song, where Rekha and Amitabh are so obnoxiously over the top. But, like, the furtive, the secrecy, the hiding behind him, the going and meeting this person, the arrest, like where Kulbhushan Karbanda basically discovers what's going on and stuff like that. You feel so bad for Sanjeev Kumar. Like, it's like, girl, if you really just want to be with Amitabh, just leave Sanjeev Kumar and move on.
Mm.
Just, or if you can't have Amitabh because he's with Jaya, whatever, then that's fine too. But, like, to leave this person just dangling, because in Silsila, unlike in Manmarziyaan, unlike in Hum Dil De Chuke Sanam, Sanjeev Kumar is not doing any of the pushing Rekha towards her ex-lover, right? He's just
Yeah.
kind of very passive and providing a little bit of a shoulder to cry on to Jaya Bachchan's character.
I don't know if you guys know this about me, but I'm a huge Sanjeev Kumar fan. Like he is like he's like one of my celebrity crushes.
Oh wow.
Him and Sosla and Sholay. Like I was obsessed with the Thakur from Sholay when I was a kid.
Manish, he
And that
has no
has carried
arms and he
over.
wears a gray wig and a shawl. I don't understand.
I used to I used to take a shawl and wrap it around me and go around calling myself the Thakur. So
No.
I love Thakur, and I mean I still love Sanjeev Kumar, you know, to this day. And I feel like yeah, he trusted the process and he gets the girl at the end. So like
Yeah.
there's some, you know, there's some merit to that, yeah, to that theory or to that
That's
method.
the older, wiser way to do
Yeah.
it, right? Like you were saying, just let her spin out and she'll probably come back to you.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's what my boyfriend he lets me go out of control. And then he's like, okay, now you're coming back to me and it's fine.
And he is, I mean, he certainly seems like the oldest of the four, right, in the
Yeah.
movie. So he's got this kind of like it'll yeah, don't poke the bear, don't pick at the scab or whatever, right? It'll probably sort itself out. And if she was
Yeah.
willing enough to do what her parents wanted to get married to you, then probably she will also return to you once this is out of her
Yeah.
system or is just fully unavailable to her, whichever comes first.
Beth, I have seen Shakespearewallah, but that was about a year ago, so I
Oh,
don't
wow.
quite recall. I went through a major Merchant Ivory phase
Sure.
this time last year,
Nice.
because I was interested in seeing like Shashi Kapoor's, you know,
Yeah.
non-masala
Yeah.
movies, and also just like they're such an iconic, you know, gay couple,
Yeah.
cross-cultural, you know,
Yeah.
with their little like menage with Ruth. You know, I love the
Right.
three of them.
Right. Speaking of
Um,
triangles, yeah.
right,
What's going on
exactly.
there?
But I was curious about your perspective on Shakespearewallah and like having the two women and the men as opposed to
Hmm.
like our two movies of being
Hmm.
two men and a woman and how that played out differently. I don't
So
quite recall the movie so perfectly.
I think the major the major difference, and I wouldn't have thought about it had you not just asked me in the context of this conversation, I think, is that Madhur Jaffrey's character, the actress Manjula, she's a master manipulator and she's very petty. And it's that is a thing that men like to ascribe to women, although the screenwriter of this film is a woman, but that's a thing that like it's very tempting to be like meh about her, which we maybe wouldn't say as much about a man. However, she is also petulant and manipulative, and you see her. So when she finds out um that Shashi is in this, having some kind of relationship with Sanju is his name, with Lizzie here, she invites Lizzie to tea, and they are staying at hotels across the street from each other. And one is Lizzie's in the like shabby old fashioned British hotel, and Manjula is in the more expensive new hotel. Invites her over to tea, has her servant roll out this giant cart of tea things. You can tell Lizzie's completely overwhelmed because they are on a shoestring budget. There's no like massive
Right.
meals being rolled out for them anywhere, at least not under their own steam. And then, you know, she proceeds to talk about like, oh, I see you've met my darling Sanju, and now, and I'll just have you know that no one knows him as well as I do. No woman loves him as much as I do. And there have been many, but he always comes back to me and he's so
Yeah.
tired and I hold him in my arms. And then she starts to offer Lizzie like a tray of something like, oh, here, eat. And then Lizzie tries to push it away and it falls to the floor. And like it's this big dramatic moment. And she pushed every single button of Lizzie on
Yeah.
purpose. Like she did all of
Right.
that. So it has a lot of what I think is tempting to call cattiness, and that
Right.
again, that very manipulative kind of thing. And because I can't decide if I should be spoilery about this or not. I don't know how many people will have seen this film, so I'll try to hold off. But it doesn't really work.
Mm.
Um, but and then Sanju walks in on them having tea, and Shashi does such a great job of like, right,
Yeah.
like these two women are in the same room, and Lizzie is on her way out the door, and very very upset, and he follows after her. But then one of her Indian colleagues in the theater troupe is like, just don't follow her, like stop.
Right.
um so it's I think that we also have an age difference between the two women, and I was actually looking that up this time. So Madhur Jaffrey is about 13 years older, I think, than Felicity Kendal.
Oh,
I'm not
Oh
wow.
sure if
wow.
she's supposed to be that in the film, but Felicity Kendal, I think, is supposed to be like 18, basically. So Manju is maybe 30, close to 30, something like that. But she very much is much more a woman of the world in a lot of ways. She's more cosmopolitan, she's more polished, she's more conventionally beautiful. She is used to having her own way. There's a scene where they're shooting a very filmy song, right, where she's dancing around trees and mouthing to the music. And she decides she's had enough and she yells, pack up, and she's out. And they actually carry her out on a sedan chair with a parasol. That's how much of a princess she is, right? Whereas
Wow.
Lizzie here is like hitchhiking and they're barely making, they're rattling along in their old jalopies on the highways and their cars break down or they're on a train or whatever. So very, very different worlds. And I do think all of us have there's contrast in the two competitors for whatever the relationship
Yeah.
is, right? Because otherwise it's not as interesting, I think. And I don't know if that's how real life love triangles seem to be or not, but I think it's fun to watch those contrasts play out, which adds to the instability of the shape.
Yeah, exactly.
So, in a lot of the Bollywood love triangles, there's such a strong, like usually the villain in these movies is the family, right? Because it's always
Mhm.
like these two people are in love, and then because of like whatever log kya kahenge, the family is like, no, you can't marry this person. You got to marry this person that we have handpicked for you. That happens in Dil De Chuke Sanam. That happens in Silsila. That happens in Manmarziyaan. Does that? It seems like that does not have anything to do with Shakespearewallah, right? Like that's
No,
okay,
we don't know how Sanju and Manjula met. They've clearly been an item off and on, or like when they're in the same town for a long time. But Lizzie and Sanju meet accidentally because their cars have broken, the theater troupe, his cars have broken down, and he's coming back to his like country estate with his friends for a shooting party, and he helps them
mm,
out and lets them pitch tents in his front yard. And then he's she's so good at this. He knows he's handsome and rich and young, and and he's very flirty with her, and it works. She totally falls
right,
for it. And her mother is like basically saying to her, watch it.
right,
This
Yeah.
guy is no good. But he is also quite taken by the world of theater, I think, as a lot of
mm,
people are, right? The first time you're in a school play and you're like, this is the best feeling in the world. And so he loves watching them perform. He very much compliments the parents on their work, especially the dad, and that really means a lot to him because he's the one really watching the world he has known crumble because they are not relevant anymore. So to
right.
have a young Indian person tell him like you're so amazing when you play Othello and whatever, he's like, thank you.
It feels validating to him.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
in the world of Shakespearewallah, for instance, if Shashi Kapoor's character decided to actually be with Felicity and like not be with Manjula anymore for whatever reason. So it seems like there wouldn't actually be any obstacles in his and Felicity's path, except for maybe Manjula just going on some sort of vindictive
I
tirade,
mean,
right?
Lizzie's parents would not be super excited about it, but
Okay.
I honestly think they'd probably let it happen because it gives them a longer tie to India, or at least the
Mm,
dad, right? If his daughter married an Indian man, that would give him an excuse to stay.
right.
The mother seems to be much more homesick for England than the
Mm,
father. So she's a little more of a mixed bag, but also this marriage would not work because Lizzie has said, all I know is being an actress. That's who I am, but I would give it all up for you. All you have to do is say so. And then he clearly can't handle the fact that she's an actress. Even
right.
like you get the sense he would demand that she give it up, and that would be terrible for both of them. So
Okay.
I, it wouldn't work.
Okay. So, what are some other love triangles that you guys like? Manish, go first.
Mm.
I mean, I'm a big Devdas fan. That's like the movie that introduced me to like understanding how movies work. When I
Mm.
was 13 and I've seen the movie many, many times, it's one of my favorite, I think, romance movies. Particularly because I find it so I think the characters are just really rich to think about in all the ways in which pride and class and money and wealth and how they all kind of shift between, who has the most power in the
Mm.
relationship. At some point, like Shah Rukh Khan's character is like the most wealthy, and then he kind of loses his wealth. And then Aishwarya Rai, marries way up, and then, there's just so much back and forth in that, like a lot of those like role reversals in terms of how they relate to each other. So I find that to be interesting, with Madhuri Dixit also in there, and how the level of devotion that she has, and how that's her own kind of power as well. I also love, I love Chandani, as I mentioned. I know people, I know like when Manmarziyaan came out, people were saying, oh, it's like the cashed up version of Hum Dil De Chuke Sanam, but
Mm.
I feel like it's more Chandani just because it's like this like maturity and immaturity concept, and there's also this class concept too as well. And just the way in which this like Manmarzia is so dedicated to like showcasing Tapsi Pannu's character in all her glory and all of her all her flaws, all her personality. I feel the same way about Chandani too, which is it's such a showcase for Sri Devi in so many different ways. Also, I was thinking about I don't know if this really counts, but like Luck by Chance is another great and as another great love triangle, even though it's sort of like in this more like ensemble type movie, but there is this like core thing. Something that I really have been thinking about as we were talking is this idea of like how class plays into, or how like class and
Mm.
wealth play into love triangles, because sometimes there is this thing of like, like in Manmarzia, Vicky is like, I mean, he has no job, no life, nothing going for him. His family, they seem okay, as opposed to, Abhishek Bachchan's character who comes from overseas and is, wealthy and has seems to have his life together, and how that plays into it. And I was wondering if you guys had any thoughts on that as well. I mean, I know we can go back to the original question, but that was what I was thinking
I,
about.
I think I'd have to like actually kind of write myself a little inventory. But if the goal, here are my finger quotes, right? Goal of a relationship is a heterosexual marriage and family stability that comes from that, then yeah, wealth and class are gonna
Mm.
um have a really powerful um impact there. But then also, I feel like, particularly in Bollywood, first love is often so much a deal. So, like, that can compete, right? So, which one's going to
Yeah,
win, first love or money or
Right.
yeah,
stability in whatever form that may be? So, those two can really pit against each other, which your film, Manish, does, I think, really well. So,
yeah.
that's kind of those are I feel like off the top of my head anyway, those are probably the two camps that the sides of a triangle would most often fall into. Maybe not always, but and just every now and again, I can't think of a good example, but I know I've seen it where you think for sure first love is going to win, but then it doesn't, like Pitu's film, for example. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
you can't always bank on it. Not always.
Right. Like even if you look at Hamdal De Chuke Sanam, for example, like Samir comes in, he is constantly referred to as Hawa ka jhoka, like a breath of fresh air, right? Because he just comes in the sands from Italy or whatever, and he is so charming. He's so funny. I actually think Salman is really funny in like the comedic scenes. He brings
Mm,
like a lightheartedness, and Aishwarya's character, her fun-loving nature and her mischief really mirrors that. Like they have great chemistry. I believe they were in a relationship during the shooting of this film, and you could
mm,
see it. Like especially in songs like "Chan Chupa Badal Mein." I mean, it's sizzling. They look really good together. But you can also see where Salman's character is very much seen as, oh, he's the Pardesi. He is here for a bit. We'll have a good time with him. He'll learn some stuff. We'll learn some stuff. And then he's going to go back because this is not his place. And he's also seen a little bit as like a court jester, right? Like all
mm,
the antics he's up to. Like he shows up to their dinner table where all these people, where do they manufacture these gigantic dinner tables, you guys? There's this gigantic dinner table with like 25 people sitting over there. I want to see the size of their kitchen. And he shows up in like a towel, and everyone's like, why are you in a towel? And he's like, oh no, I forgot to wear a shirt. Like he is so ridiculously ditzy, but at the
mm.
same time, he's so funny. But you also know they're never going to give their prized, gorgeous, talented daughter's hand to this dude that they basically see as a court jester. So
Yeah.
he's charming, he's cute, he's good enough as a guest, he's good enough as her father's student. He's not good enough for her hand. When it comes to getting her married, they're going to marry her off to this guy who's like an attorney, and his dad is an attorney, and they're wealthy, and he's, you know, Ajay Devgan, and he's all like serious and stern, and he's going to help prop up the family values and all of those things. So there's so much of that like consciousness in this movie too, and it doesn't have much to do with financials. Like, it's kind of unclear what Salman's background is. So much about Salman's background in this movie is unclear. Like, I know his mom is Helen, and like his dad is dead, and he keeps talking to his dad. That's a red flag also. He keeps talking to God / his dad, making these comments, and I'm like, boy, you need grief counseling. But I don't know what his financials are supposed to be. But it's also like this girl who is so naive and silly. There's a scene she has with Zohra Sehgal, which I love Zohra Sehgal. I was like, yeah, squealed a little when she came on screen, where she says to Zohra Sehgal, oh, so then you got married to Dadaji, and then, you know, you guys kissed or whatever, and then did you get pregnant? And then Zohra Sehgal is like, people do not get pregnant just from kissing. And so she's this extremely naive person. I was like, sex education, y'all, you'll need it.
Honestly.
And she's so sheltered and cocooned, and I don't know if this girl goes to school or college or what. All she does is dance. And what's going to happen if she marries Salman's character? Like, what, she's going to move to Italy, but he's a child, she's a child. I don't know how these people are going to carve out a future for themselves. So I hate to be on the side of the dad who's all like parampara pratishtha anushasan, but you guys, I was not very optimistic for their first love panning out into a successful life. So I hate to be the hater, but
no, it's the same in Manmarziyaan, because, you know, as they're making these, you know, arguments, as her parents are arguing with her about, you know, her relationship, or, you know, or how like she needs to think about what she wants when she gets married. I was kind of like, yeah, they have a point. Like, your boyfriend's trash. Like, I'm sorry, he's cute, and I get it. I totally get it. But like, you gotta like wake up. Something I don't like to tell my dad is that he's always right, and I hate it, because I was like, I want him to be wrong, but I don't know. Maybe it's a parent thing that they're just somehow always right, even when they're annoying about it.
do you is there a love triangle that you guys like, where, for example, you think it would actually be okay if they stayed with the person that, I mean, is where there's not a clear bad choice? Like, for example, I don't think Dil De Pagal is some like great, amazing movie or whatever, but I've seen it multiple times because I love Shah Rukh, I love Madhuri, I love the songs in it, and I like the direction, but it's not like a favorite. But I feel like Dil De Pagal is one of those movies where if Shah Rukh, you know, picked Karishma's character over Madhuri's, I feel like that could totally work. They're friends. She clearly is head over heels in love with him. She comes kind of from that world of like the stage dancers and everything. And I feel like that could totally work. And it's not necessarily like, oh boy, you just need to be with the Madhuri character. Like, both of those are fine for me. Are there other movies where you guys don't feel as strongly about whom the person picks?
That's a really hard question. I was trying to think about that earlier, in terms of like honorable mentions, and just, I mean, I really can't think of one. I mean, I was thinking about the movie Cocktail with,
Oh, yeah.
you know, with Deepika and Saif Ali Khan and that other actress. Oh God,
Dinah
Dinah.
Penty?
Yeah. I think that was also one where I didn't quite know who he was going to end up with at the end when I was watching the film. And I remember being like, well, Deepika's a bigger star, but like, so that makes sense. But then there's so many times when the bigger star doesn't get the girl or doesn't get the guy. So I'm like, well, I don't really understand. And so, I mean, so that was one way I could see him with either one. I mean, I haven't seen the movie in quite some time, so maybe when I rewatch it, it'll click a little bit better. But that's definitely one that I thought about. And yeah, I really can't think of any others that I can like think of like where I've seen the movie enough to like really know. But I don't. Do you have any examples or any?
I thought of two, both of which we talked about extensively, so I don't want to go too on, but one is Barfi,
Yeah.
where the whichever woman he chose, it would have been a very different world for him, right? Like his world would be different depending on which of them.
Yeah.
And also in that film, I feel like Barfi seems to really enjoy the fact that he can like be a good influence or help Priyanka's character in a way. So like maybe that's partly what he's choosing, is that he likes being the like a real prop to the responsibility of being adults or something like that.
Yeah.
And like obviously they get each other in a way that I feel like he doesn't with the first woman he's in love with. But so that's kind of one, but that one also sets itself up from the beginning. You know which one he's going to choose. So like it's not,
Right,
but
right.
then also kuch hota hai, right? Like I don't think there was for those characters, I didn't really feel like there was a wrong choice necessarily, but I do think it's true that poor Anjali needed a break from that little world and to get to be her own self outside of the
Right.
shadow of Rahul. So
Yeah, yeah.
I think that had to happen before she was enough of a whole person to really, in any kind of wise way, commit to anyone.
Right.
So that also kind of happened as it should. And that is so crafty, that movie, getting to have both triangles, right? Like, and getting to have both the love interests by
Yeah.
bumping one of them off. And that must be a thing that happens a lot where a love is the first choice is eliminated somehow after some sense of resolution. So it's really like, yeah, you don't have to have someone walk away empty-handed. You might have to kill somebody, but you don't. So that's a slight twist. And I was like, oh, of course, Keijo wanted to have his cake and eat it too. I see, and I'd never thought about that till just now, actually. Like kind of
Yeah,
thinking
yeah.
about the different things that can happen with three or with the triangle, and it's really interesting to wonder if like 25 years from now, 50 years from now, like as polyamory becomes a little more common, right? Or like open relationships in some way, are we going to get triangles that don't feel that no one feels the need to resolve into the same pairing way that they tend to have been? Like, is triangle going to become less of a dynamic, dramatic force?
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know.
I'm surprised there hasn't been some like Netflix original movie that's about like a polyamorous couple or something. I mean, that feels
Yeah.
like something that could happen very easily. The movie Dog with kind of ends in like a menage a trois because
Mm,
it's about this I don't you've seen it or
mm-mm.
yeah, so it's about this guy Rajesh Khanna, who marries Sharmila Tagore, and then he gets accused of murder,
Oh, yes, I have seen that.
and
I
You have
forgot.
seen it.
Yeah, that's a good one.
and then like years later, she finds that he's married to Rocky, and it kind of ends with like the three of them like living together
That's right.
because like Rocky's in love with him and they're in love together, and there's no point where they're like, okay, bye, Rocky, we're just gonna do because he kind of accepted Rocky's son as his own, so there's just like this like happy family of three people. Now, I can't tell you what happens in their bedroom or not, but I do think that there's some sense of like we don't need to resolve this with one person losing, as we were saying earlier. It can be resolved in like they do work together as a unit, and it makes more sense for them to stay together as the three.
I remember being
Versus-
shocked as
Yeah,
that movie was unfolding in front of me. I'm like,
yeah.
Yash Chopra, you messy bee. What are you doing? Yeah. Yeah, that's
Chopra is
right.
the messiest bee. We've said that before.
Yeah,
Mm.
honestly.
So there's
Um,
actually, oh, go ahead, Manish.
well, I had a question, but I didn't want to derail whatever you were going
Oh,
to
I was just going to make a quick point. There's at least two movies that come to mind to me where it is a love triangle and it's not a big deal at all. Which one movie Beth and I have already done an episode on, and that was Utsav, where
Oh,
the
sure.
fact that Shekhar Suman is married to Anuradha Patel, but then he also are you thinking about when I called Shikhar Suman a biscuit that dissolves in tea? Yes. So I told her that my disappointment with watching Shikhar Suman as a hero is like, when you get like a cup of chai and you're so looking forward to dipping your Parle-G biscuit in it and then it dissolves. You know how you feel so bad? And then you have to drink that chai with the crumbs. That's Shikhar Suman. The chai is itself. But yeah, so like, Anuradha Patel and Rekha are so buddy buddy in that movie. They have
Yeah.
like a whole like girl romance song, like Man Kyun Beheka, and like Anuradha Patel is decked out in like Rekha's jewelry. And there's actually, remember a scene in it where she actually says to Rekha that because of you, Shekhar Saman's character has become like a better lover or something. And they don't seem to have any problem with each other. And then there's also the Sham Benegal movie, Bhumika, which has Smita Patil in it. And then in Bhumika, of course, she has three different lovers at different junctures in her life. And her final person that she is, who's her lover is Amrish Puri's character. She doesn't actually marry him. She just moves into his house and is kind of his de facto wife. But he already has a wife. And Smita Patil's character does develop like a strong friendship with her son. And the the wife who is paralyzed, I think she got paralyzed in childbirth or something. She's actually very welcoming and nice towards Smita Patil's character. She's very nice to her. The Amrish Puri's mom is Deena Pathak, and she's totally chill about this random woman just
Yeah.
coming into her house and shacking up with her son. But here's the question I have for you guys. These examples that we've given, all of it is two women and one man, which is culturally far more acceptable than the opposite. I think it would be very unpalatable to most audiences if you were to do the opposite, where it's the two men and the one woman. I can't think of any Hindi movie that I've seen that actually has that. For that matter, I'm actually blanking on if there's any like Hollywood movie like that either.
Not that I can think of.
Yeah, so the menage a trois is much more acceptable when it's two women having to share. I mean, the whole thing in Mahabharata with like Draupadi and her five husbands, that's literally the only example I can think of. But that's it. Everything else is the women having to like share, I guess.
I would have to do some like research to see like if there's anything like that with two guys. Yeah, I can't even think of any like American movie. You're right. I mean, well, I think that there's definitely the like a stigma around two men being together in some kind of
That,
but not too like political, but like
no,
bisexual
you're right.
are often very much stigmatized, and dismissed. And so I think that there's definitely a stigma there. And I feel that it would be almost like I can't even think of any director that I know that would do that, unless they were like a filmmaker, like I mean, I guess like Challengers would be like the most recent example of
Oh,
one that I
yeah.
could think of where it kind of with like a two guy and a girl, polyamorous relationship. But even that kind of like it kind of cuts off before it gets there. I mean, it ends on that premise, which is, it makes sense for the movie, but that's the only one that I could think of. But yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting concept. I mean, to kind of go into like it's an interesting discussion to go into that concept to see like why it's so stigmatized.
Oh, another example was Judai that you and I have also watched.
Oh
It's
Oh,
the
yeah.
same
yeah.
thing with Anil
Wow,
Kapoor
yeah.
playing the two
Yeah.
wives. Yeah, but
But
Manish, you also
interestingly,
watched.
it's the wives' idea to do this, which is
Yeah,
fascinating too. It's not him trying
Yeah, he's
to
very
get as
much
many
like
women
a
as he
little
can.
puppet in that.
Yeah.
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 Um, yeah, I had a question about kind of like what constitutes love triangle because I was going through a lot of like romance movies just like in my own like letterboxd account to see like what, and there are a few that I was well, there is a third element in this love story, but there's such a non-presence that doesn't even count.
Yeah.
I was thinking of like Jub We Met is like another one where there is the third guy or the third person, but
Oh, yeah.
there's no like he's not on the poster. There's no way
Yeah.
he's barely a factor, and like
Hmm.
he's there as a complication, but that's it. And I mean, I don't disagree with you, but I think Dota Pagal is kind of like that. Like, I don't see any universe where Krishna Kapoor, like Shah Rukh Khan, has no in her whatsoever. So I'm like, like it does count as a love triangle, but like, does it? I don't know. I'm just getting to like the weeds, like kind of nitpicking the genre or like the trope. But I definitely thought of like another one was like Humpty Sharma Ki Dulhania, which has like the third person there, but like there's such a non thing that like it doesn't really count. There's just no way. Like look at who's on the poster or who's like made by a real actor as opposed to some rando, like not real, but like a movie star, as to some like random like character actor or like, non-star. So, um, but I was wondering if like those kinds of stories counted for you as well in terms of your like picking the movie or thinking about honorable mentions, because that really weighed heavily for me. I wanted to find one that was equally three.
Yeah. I think they have to be simultaneous for it to be a
Yeah.
triangle, because otherwise it's just, well, someone has a past
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
or is going to have a different future. Because,
Yeah.
and unless that specter looms sort of far enough for it to be, the shadow is cast far enough for it to be simultaneous, then I think that
Yeah.
is. So there must be movies where someone's deceased spouse or whatever is the third person in a current,
Yeah,
thing or
yeah.
something for a while. I'm sure that happens. But yeah, I think it has to be simultaneous or else it's not really. But like you say too, it also has to be significant. Otherwise,
Right.
it's just sort of a distraction or a blip or again, just a set of choices and one
Conflict.
was fairly quickly
Yeah.
made. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Did that happen in Does Kuch Kuch Hota Hai qualify, Beth, for what you just said? Because he has all those dialogues, right, Shahrukh, where he
Yeah.
says, "Pyar ek hi baar hota hai, shadi ek hi baar hoti hai." And so even though Farida Jalal is kind of like nagging him to get married again, and
Hmm.
he's like, "No, I'm still in
Hmm.
love with Rani Mukherjee's character," and
I
that's
think
kind
it's
of
a love
the
triangle at the beginning and then it's really not, right? Then it's
right.
just
Love triangle
sequential, but
because Khan is there in the second half. But then
that's
that's the
true.
one thing
That's
where
true.
I'm like, doesn't count because there's just no way. Like
Yeah.
you want like, you know what I mean? And like I
Yeah.
know some of that is just like, we're very smart as moviegoers and like watching these movies very much, we've watched like movies like this over and over again, so we know kind of like how it goes, and plus little bit smarter about, like how movies are made, right? So like Shah Rukh Khan's in the poster, he's the girl.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like I didn't say that like other people aren't smart, but just like I think as people that watch as many movies as we do, we can recognize like how these things go. I can't, I mean, even when I was little, I don't think I really thought of Salman Khan as like a major, you know, like a threat to this relationship.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I think that no, that was like 25 years ago, so who knows?
Yeah.
Have you seen, Manish, have you seen Hum Tumhare Hai Sanam, the Shah Rukh, Salman, and Madhu
Yeah,
movie?
yeah, yeah,
It is so terrible. I think that movie took about 10 years to be made. And you can tell how it's like super dated and stuff. It's like really bad.
yeah,
But I once said this to Beth. I was like, that movie is a definition of like wasted potential. Because look at the star power alone, right? You have a love triangle movie where you have Shah Rukh Khan, Madhuri Dixit, Salman Khan, and they were all kind of at their peak or at least in their prime when the movie started shooting. I don't know about towards the end of it. And that movie is ridiculous because Shah Rukh, well, we had a discussion the other day where Beth and I were talking about how unhinged Shah Rukh is so common in films that you literally have to make a list of films where Shah Rukh is not unhinged. And
yeah,
in Hum Tumhare Sanam, the man has not heard of the concept of men and women being friends. This is not a thing that happens according to him. So he's in the Monish Bell category of people like Maine Pyar Kiya, where he says ek
yeah,
ladka ek ladki dost nahi ho sakte. So the idea that Madhuri is friends with Salman is just such anathema to him that he just tries to destroy their whole marriage based on that. But also Madhuri's character and Salman's character in this movie, they have no common sense whatsoever. I mean, I know we're talking about how for these love triangles to be entertaining and watchable, these people cannot be too mature and sensible. But come on, you gotta have at least a modicum of common sense. And they do not. Do not be in your married friend's bedroom changing out of shirts. I mean, I know you're Salman Khan, so you want to take your shirt off all the time, but still, like, do not be doing that. And then her husband comes and he's like, "Why are you taking your shirt off?"
yeah, yeah. No, that is, I mean, I saw that movie I think I saw it in the theater when it came out because
Wow.
we were so excited about like these three actors, being there. And I know Shorty Rye had a cameo, which I loved at the time. And yeah, I don't know. It was just like, it's just, I feel like people make these movies and they just have no concept how to utilize their stars, and I'm like, who even is this like? Yeah, I don't. much about the movie. I've wanted to watch it again, just out of curiosity, because like I don't know, it feels like such a like for a movie with like the biggest stars at the time, like it's random and so like forgotten. It's hard to
Yeah,
Mm,
being that forgotten for like who's in it, you know.
true.
yeah. One love triangle movie we haven't talked about. We haven't talked about Kabhi Alvida Na Kehna. Because if you
No.
put Abhishek aside, well, okay, so aren't there two love triangles in this movie? Because there's Shah Rukh who's married to Preeti, but he's in love with Rani Mukherjee. And then there's another love triangle, connected love triangle, where Rani Mukherjee is married to Abhishek Bachchan, but she actually loves Shah Rukh Khan.
Yeah,
So
it's a
Preeti is kind of the
square.
only, yeah. So how do we feel about this movie? Because when people talk about love triangle movies, no one ever talks about Kabhi Alvida Na Kehna. They only talk about it when they're talking about movies about like infidelity and stuff like that.
I guess I don't really consider it a triangle because there's four of them,
Yeah.
you know?
Right.
So like but in terms of like and also because so that's another movie that I really love, first of all. So I think that like for me the movie is about like the this this like couple that can really only be with each other because they're both broken in a similar way, and
Mm,
Mm,
that they are getting something from each other that they can't get from their spouses, or they can't ask for from their spouses. And also this the pressure of staying in a marriage because of you have a child, or you love your father-in-law, so you want to like respect him, and so there's a lot of different things going on there. And I think it's interesting to it's think about this like love square as like two separate triangles, and how they both kind of tell two different stories about this within the movie. Like like Rani Mukherjee just doesn't have any kind of like passion or sexual chemistry with her husband, and she kind of has that with with Shah Rukh Khan, and they just have this, and he challenges her, but there's just something else there. And then look at this on the other side of the movie, the other love triangle. Um, I feel that like Shah Rukh Khan feels so like emasculated, so like
mm,
dismissed by his wife, and then Rani Mukherjee is there to really like they have a lot in common, and they are really just like she doesn't really let him slide in a lot of his crankiness, and the way they kind of try to help each other in their marriages, and then just kind of realize that no, the piece that we're looking for is the piece that we're missing, we're looking for is the other person. So I think I think it's a good movie about marriage. Well, not that I've ever been married, but I think it's a good movie about marriage because it's about like how you know how marriages can just really fall apart, and there's just so much distance, and there's no connection, and how you don't want to find that connection in someone else, but then you kind of do, and then you're kind of stuck with it, and to see how that plays out. But again, I've never been married, so I don't know what I'm talking about. But in terms of that, but I find it interesting as like just a character study. But yeah, I always think of it as a square, really,
mhm,
because there's so many different pieces to it. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's a fascinating way to talk about in terms of its relationships, because I think that movie has I don't know, that movie felt ahead of its time when it came out. It
mhm,
feels
yeah.
more so now.
mhm, mhm.
I feel like Kabhi Alvita Na Kehna is very polarizing because people either really love it, like I love Kabhi Alvita Na Kehna,
Yeah.
or people are like, oh, that movie is such drac. Like very
Yeah.
rarely will you get kind of like an in-between response to
Yeah,
that
Mm.
yeah.
film. But yeah. Beth, do you agree with Manish? Do you feel
I
it's more of a
haven't
square?
seen it in a very long time.
Hmm.
I would say I think it's a square, and I guess I might say Silsila is also a
Yeah.
square or something
Yeah.
like it.
Because
The more
Sanjeev
we
Kumar.
talk, yeah, but then also Ghost of Dead Shashi, right, is also kind of a
Right.
point
Oh,
Yeah, it's
yeah.
is
a
that
pentagon actually.
yeah, and that's kind of the reason for the thing is that the fact that this original person died. So, um,
And it's about is it and
it's
Tyag, our
our
favorite
favorites.
words.
Um, I I have not seen Kank in a long time,
Hmm.
but at some do you remember that amazing website, The Big Indian Picture?
Mm-mm.
about film writing. I loved that. It was only around for a couple of years, kind of an online magazine. They had great, and they had a really good interview with Karan Johar.
Oh,
And
is
he
that the one
talks,
that Anurag Kashyap used to write some? He had written some. No, I was
I
thinking of a
think
different one.
that's,
Okay.
yeah, that's is that Passion for Cinema, I think. I think that's that
Yes.
one.
Okay.
Yeah, and in his interview, he talks about, how kind of sad he was about how Kank didn't didn't get to people the way he wanted it to and didn't get across the
Mm.
ideas he was hoping to do. And it made me really rethink the movie and I have not rewatched it, but I should, because I keep thinking about that here and there. And I need to actually just reread the interview too, or rewatch it. Um, because I tend to agree with Manish. I think it's ahead of its time.
Hmm.
Um, and that the celebrity of the people involved and the tent poles that hold up each of their celebrities were overshadowed what he was trying to do in
Mm.
the film, and like the unwillingness of audiences to accept certain people doing certain things in certain
Right.
kinds of films, right? So
Yeah, yeah.
I think that film was really hampered by that, I suspect. So I should watch it again at some point. um
Yeah, I've had a few conversations with people because I love this movie so much where when they have a very strong knee-jerk negative reaction where they're like, "Oh my God, I hate that movie." I'm always curious to hear why, right? Like, do you just think it's badly made? Do you not like the story? Do you not like the characters? What about this movie are you responding so strongly to? And every single person, and I haven't spoken to that many people, like maybe like four, but all four people basically told me that their problem with Kabhi Alvida Na Kehna was not the fact that Shahrukh, who's in a loveless marriage, falls in love with Rani, who's also in a loveless marriage, and they seek sort of solace in each other. Their problem with it was the fact that the movie rewards the
Oh, yeah.
cheaters, as it will, because at the end they do find each other, right?
mhm.
I mean, there is that brief period of separation that was an intentional choice on Karan Johar's part, based on an interview I read of his, where he didn't want them to immediately have a happy ending. They had to suffer first, but after that suffering, they do find each other. And a lot of people, the people that I spoke to, said that they felt that that was kind of like justifying infidelity. And I was like, that is a very interesting take. That's a very interesting take. I don't agree with it, because the what you're saying then, if that is a completely unacceptable resolution to this film, that what you're saying is you want Shahrukh to continue being miserable and for Preeti to continue being miserable because they clearly don't love each other. You also want Rani and Abhishek also to continue. So you would prefer a resolution where all four are miserable and perhaps those couples get divorced, but it is not acceptable to you for those two clearly screwed up marriages to end and for at least these two people to find love together. So I just found that very interesting, because when you pick it apart, people get very, very defensive. Because I was like, you want all four to be miserable? And they're like, no,
Yeah.
that's not what I'm saying. And I'm like, but you kind of are, though.
And it's interesting because Shah Rukh and Rani Murphy get together, yeah, 3 years later, and also
Yeah.
after their exes also are remarried or in other relationships, So it's like
Yeah.
Mm.
everyone's kind of moved on, and everyone seems to be like, yes, maybe the way it happened wasn't the best, but ultimately
Right.
the results made everyone much happier. So
Yeah.
let these two finally have some time together.
To say
Yeah,
that those people should be punished for their infidelity or at least not rewarded is very juvenile, I have to
yeah,
say. Like,
Yeah.
that's a pretty immature response. And I know that we don't look to mainstream Hindi films for like that's how life works, but
Mm.
there are also ways that life works, and like life's not fair. You know what? Have you heard that
Yeah.
before?
Yeah.
yeah.
And it yeah, exactly what you're saying. Like the extension of that is then you think all of these people should be miserable forever, and
Yeah.
that's a
Yeah.
very unkind thing to do. And like, well, they didn't follow the rules, so therefore,
Yeah.
me. And we're like, well,
Sorry, I
that just isn't a
guess.
thing. I just isn't a
Yeah,
it
exactly.
isn't
Like,
a
I'm
thing.
sorry.
And
Like,
like, but
yeah.
if you're gonna take that logic, then people get outsizedly punished for things in films all the time. So
They
are you
do.
sitting over here complaining about how that's not fair? Like,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
you're being very indiscriminate about how you apply that kind of thing. And
Right.
I think for a lot of these people, really what upsets them is that they didn't want to see Shah Rukh do it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think
That's the
so.
real issue
Yeah.
here.
Whereas I this is
Right.
one of his most brave and fearless performances because he's
Yeah.
such a jerk for 3 hours
Yeah.
straight,
He's
and
so
then
awful.
like,
Yeah.
but that's like I don't know. It's the shark thing is still working for me. I'm kind of into it, you
Yeah.
know. Like I'm like,
Yeah.
look, if he ever like yelled at me in New York, I'd be like very happy.
I mean, I love surly Shah Rukh. I love sad Shah
Yeah,
Rukh. So I'm all for
yeah,
Shah Rukh
exactly.
being.
Like,
He's so grumpy in that movie, and I still think he's so hot. He's walking with a
exactly,
limp. I still think he's hot. Like the hotness quotient
exactly.
of that man, it just never dips. But to go off of the point that you just made, Beth, I do think that that is a consideration that a lot of filmmakers have in mind,
Of
that
course.
you cannot have the people in the love triangle succeed, because they don't succeed in Silsila either at
No,
the end, right? He
no.
goes back to Jaya Bachchan, who very conveniently is pregnant. It's always a baby that is keeping these two together, isn't it? So that
Because
happens in
what's great for
Silsila.
a kid is to have parents who don't like each other. That's
Yes.
that's excellent.
That is the best option.
Demonstratively excellent.
Yes. So that
Demonstrably,
happens
sorry.
in Silsila. It also happens in Hum Dil De Chuke Sanam. It happens in Wo Saath Din. In all of these movies where you have this love triangle, at the end, no one is ever rewarded for the naughty thing that they did. Even in Manmarziyaan, where there's no happy ending per se, if I remember correctly, don't all three go their individual paths?
No, so yeah, Taapsee Pannu and Abhishek Bachchan like get their marriage annulled, but then on the
Right.
way back, like as they're walking, they're like actually having a real conversation for
Mm.
once,
Mm.
and they kind of like hint towards they'll reconcile almost immediately. So like
Mm.
they don't get remarried at the end, but like there's
Right.
that hint that they probably will, or that they are finally like seeing each other as like people. So I
Mm.
think it's a romantic ending. Because
Mhm.
I love an
Mm.
ending that's like a promise, an ellipsis for
Mm.
a
Mm.
definitive ending. Because I like
Nice.
to me, it feels more romantic to imagine it than to actually see it.
Would you be interested in a sequel to Manmarzia, where flash
No.
forward 10 years later, Taapsee and Abhishek are married, and guess who shows up in their life? It's Vicky Kaushal.
Oh, that I would love. I would
He's
love.
the DJ at their wedding.
Yes,
Yeah.
he's the DJ at their kids' like
There
Oh
you
my
go.
God.
16th birthday or
There you
something.
go. Still DJing.
Okay, actually that I'd watch for sure. I'd watch
That's
that for
funny.
sure. I actually have another movie that I can't believe I completely forgot about until all this talk about Shah Rukh and Preeti, but Kal Ho Na Ho, it feels like a
Yeah.
major
Yeah.
love triangle, and that's another. I can't believe I completely forgot it because it's one of my favorites. That feels like another one where, like, I guess you really don't know. I mean, you do know, but like, she could go with either guy and it would be great, you know. And
Yeah.
that like that's the tragedy of the movie is that like there's no both options for her are tragic and but also like happy endings too. Like it's a really I think a really cool way to do that story.
Although
Mhm.
in that one, Shark is gonna die. So
Well, yeah, but it's like if that like that's the beauty of it. Like if that wasn't there, then he would be like he would they would be great together. And so, like that's what makes the movie so I think, sad and
yeah.
rewatchable for me is that like there's so much like that's where the tension comes from is that like there's no bad option.
Isn't I? It's been some time since I watched Kal Ho Na Ho. We done an episode on it for its like some big anniversary it had, but if I remember correctly, doesn't Shah Rukh kind of like push her towards Saif Ali Khan precisely because he knows he's gonna
Yeah,
die?
yeah.
So
Mhm.
there's a
Yeah.
lot of that tyag
He plays
happening.
match he plays matchmaker for them and the thing is that that's his like final act of like romance like that's his like final act of love towards her is that like I'm
Mm,
with you so I'm you know I'm finding the right guy for you or like showing this right guy for you is like has been there all along.
Mhm.
Um so that's the to me, that's like I find myself gravitating more towards like bittersweet, that like sad romance movies as I'm
Mm.
getting older. I find them more interesting to think about and to talk about than like, you know, boy meets girl, they get together, happy ending, you know, like
Totally.
I mean I enjoy that too, but I think there's always I tend to prefer when there's a little bit of a wrinkle there, a little bit more of like tragedy or you know, I don't know, some kind of like conflict or something that's like insurmountable. Like it's not just, oh, my
Mm.
parents approve, so we're gonna run away. But like
Yeah.
our parents don't approve and we have to, like get them on board, or I have to marry someone else, or I have to do this or that. I just think that's more interesting to think about like how like why humans make the decisions they do, and like why an adult like 20-year-old or 30-year-old like just listens to their parents and doesn't just run off. Like that to me is more interesting to think about than just like, I don't know. I just find that the bittersweet or like the more complicated, the more like, quote unquote problematic stuff is more interesting to me as I'm getting
Yeah.
older.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because it's a little too pat to have it all be like cute and someone just gracefully steps aside and then they meet their Juhi
Yeah.
Chawla by the side of the road, right?
Right,
Like
right,
so
exactly.
so it's yeah, it's a little more it may not be emotionally as satisfying or something, but it's definitely there's a real emotional reality to that is kind of
Yeah,
taps into lived well, a lot of our
Yeah.
lived experiences. So
There
yeah.
used to be these movies back in the 90s, like Sajan comes to mind, for instance, where it would be like these two friends and these two male friends, and then they fall in love with the same girl. And there was always this very annoying, extremely annoying dialogue where they would basically like do tyag and give up the girl to the other person. And I was like, y'all, she is not a football. She's not a DVD. She's an actual human being. You don't just give people to other people. What is wrong with you? So Sergeant, for example, is a movie that really raises my blood pressure because I love the songs in it. I love Sanjay Dutt in it. I love Madhuri in it. I actually kind of like Salman to some extent in it also. But the way they keep talking about her, like it's like a passing the parcel kind of game, and
I feel
they
like
don't even think about her.
I feel like I just maybe was it Sajin? There was one movie where there was like a whole like sequence where she's like, I'm not a toy that you can pass around. Was it Sajin
Yes,
or
that is
was it
Sajan. Yeah.
mm,
okay?
So
Uh
my blood pressure steadily increases during that movie, and I get madder and madder. And then, thankfully, thank God, Madhuri has
yeah.
this monologue where she gets really pissed at both of them, and
mm,
she's like, "Listen, y'all," and she has this like come to Jesus moment with them, where she's like, "I'm
Yeah,
not." She
yeah.
literally uses those words, "I'm not a toy. You can't just pass me around." And I'm like, "At a girl," and I'm like, "You know what you should do now that you've given them this like tongue lashing? You need to be like, you know what? For the record, both of you suck, and I don't want to have anything to do with you." And she should just like walk out of there. That's the ending I wanted for Sajjan. So that's the ending I've imagined
Always.
for it.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just thinking about like there's really not that many movies where no one ends up with anyone, that
Where no
they're
one would.
mm,
there's no like the person in the middle just kind of goes off on their own. I really can't
Mm.
think of, especially I'm sure in American movies I can think of a few, but definitely in India I feel like people like that, that ending at the wedding altar.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Did anyone have any other thoughts on love triangles?
No, I mean I don't think I'm in one, so I'm not looking to be in one, but
No,
it
sounds
does sound kind of
complicated.
fun, I guess.
I'm happy to hear about other people's. Like, if you want to give me your
Yeah.
gossip,
Right.
tell me
Yes.
about it. I will, at least for a while, be like, yes, tell me more. And at a certain point, I will say, you need to make a choice to like, nope, out of
Yeah.
that probably. But for a
Yeah.
while, I'm definitely up to listen to them.
Yeah.
Just saw this meme the other day that I immediately forwarded to all my friends, where it's basically this person says, "I don't like drama. I don't do drama. I don't want drama in my life." And then they're like, "But did you hear about that person?" And I am definitely that
Yeah.
person because I'm like,
Yeah,
no
yeah.
drama, don't want no drama, just have my normal boring life, which is really great. I have to do laundry right after the Zoom call. But if y'all have some drama and y'all have some love triangle and you want to use me as your therapist, I am very happy to hear all the sordid details. I won't even judge. I'll just be entertained and I'll just give bad advice. Okay, I think that concludes this episode then. And then thank you so much, Manish, for coming. We had so much fun chatting with you.
Thank
Manish,
And
will
then,
you.
you give your social media handles before we
yes,
sign off? For if I don't think we have any listeners who don't know who you are, but just in case.
You can find me on Twitter and Bluesky at Vertigay314. Vertigay 314. Also, my podcast, The Drafts, can be found on Twitter, and it's on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. listen to the Kapoor Dynasty Top 10 and the Famous Duos Top 13, which
Yeah.
has Beth and Pitu together. So those are really great episodes, lots of turns. So
Can I just say that if you showed somebody those lists, they would never ever guess what we were actually ranking. I don't
yeah,
think.
yeah.
And I think I
The
actually said
Kapoor
that.
one turned out to be like a Shami Kapoor
It's so wild.
list.
Yes.
So I was talking to Rajasthan a little bit after that recording, which he was unfortunately not able to come to. And he was like, I was so bummed to miss it. How'd it go? And we were talking a bit. And he goes, I was really worried without me there wouldn't be any Shashi representation. And I was like, Rajasthan, we have known each other for like, I don't know, 15 years or whatever. You know that I
Yeah,
will make
yeah.
Shashi on there at least once. Now, I didn't go into explaining to him how many vetoes I had and everything, but I was like,
Right.
Never fear, Beth is here."
Yeah,
Right. He's
yeah.
also a Shami Kapoor fan too.
He is, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, good, good. I know I felt so bad, but it's just hard to schedule. So hopefully I'll get him on the podcast at some
Scheduling
point.
internationally is just
Oh
It's
impossible.
something
Lord.
that I realize in every episode. I'm like, I want all these people together and it's so exciting. And then I'm like, wait, someone's in California, someone's in Australia, someone's in India, I'm in on the East Coast. Like I forget that like people live in different times. And
I
also
know.
no one wants to be up at 6 a.m. Like I'll do it at 6 a.m. I don't care. I'll do it at
Bollywood
10 p.m. I don't care. But like it's a challenge.
Bollywood fandom should just be our own country and we all live there and
I
it's all in the
know.
same time
Yes.
zone. Where is teleporting? Where's our song teleporting technology that we have been
Seriously.
Exactly.
promised for decades?
I
We will
Exactly.
all just
know.
meet in Switzerland and it will be fine.
Yeah.
Yes. Can we all be in chiffon saris in Switzerland in the snow?
Yes.
I mean, I'm a sensible Midwesterner. I know not to wear a chiffon sari in the snow, but I will
I mean,
I will be your doofy friend in the pom-pom hat throwing snowballs.
we'll
Yeah,
give
yeah.
you mittens though, Beth.
Okay.
We'll give you
Okay.
mittens
That helps.
and Uggs and stuff. You'll be fine. We'll even let you pick your chiffon sari
Can you
color.
imagine
Just
Yash
kidding.
Chopra in the age of Uggs? Like that doesn't make sense at all.
Oh my God.
I mean, they would have overlapped technically, but like it doesn't vibe.
There
Yeah.
has to be at least one Bebo movie where she's worn Uggs. There just has to be,
Oh.
right? Like it's
Yeah,
Bebo.
probably.
Bebo should be in Uggs. Bebo should also be in Juicy
Sure.
Couture. Like there's that
Yeah.
whole like
I feel like Preeti is going to be the
era.
one in Uggs rather than Bebo.
Yes.
But yeah.
Well, it looks like we all have homework. Manish is going to do some homework on like these love triangle movies, and then you and I are going to try to find who wore Uggs and Juicy Couture. Okay, well, I think that concludes this episode. Thank you so much for coming, Manish. And
Thank
we had lots
you.
of fun. And then to our viewers, tell us what you think about love triangles. What are your favorite love triangle movies? Have you seen the 3 movies that we talked about?
Give us your
Also-
Valentine's drama in the comments. We want to know.
Yes. And we will
Yes.
not judge you, we promise. And you
Nope.
don't even have to say your own name. You could just be like, my friend.
Mm.
And then we'll be like, do tell. We'll have our tea ready. And then Manish can also come in and chime in and give you his bad advice. We
For
should,
sure.
you know what we should do? We should start like a relationship podcast where we give people relationship advice, but it's all filmy and it's all based on movies we've seen. We would destroy people's lives.
I would be like, go to Switzerland, stalk her husband, take her on a boat. You know.
Okay,
Take her
on
to
that
a balcony, push her off the edge.
Right,
as
exactly.
Shah Rukh does, yeah. Anyway, on that extremely unhinged note, thank you for watching and happy Valentine's Day. Bye.
Bye.